I'll get straight to the point. Please do excuse the hoodie because it's rather informal. It's freezing cold here. Anyway, today I'm going to be talking about the idea of MOD procurement and contracts in general. I do realise there's a lot of confusion surrounding the matter. There's a lot of people who don't quite have the information that one would necessarily like them to have. So I think it's important to actually talk about it and to perhaps demystify the area a bit. So I'm going to be doing maybe 1 or 2 or 3 videos on sort of MOD transparency, procurement, contract processes, that sort of thing. And perhaps just open people up to the process a little bit more so that they have a bit of a greater understanding. So there is a misconception that the MOD is a closed shop in regard to contracts in general. That is simply not the case. It's really quite a clearly defined process. So hopefully with a little bit of demystification, I can sort of explain how procurement works and help to clear things up a little bit. Because I really do consider it a rather uninformed performance when people claim that defence procurement in general is entirely a closed shop to smaller businesses, to firms that provide non-physical technologies. So I think that's important to get over as a hurdle to people's understanding of the industry. So today I'm going to be covering effectively budgetary and contracts transparency by the MOD. So the first thing to establish is that the MOD is a ministry of the government. That is to say, it's not meant to be some organisation in the ether. It's not meant to exist in a vacuum, per se. It exists to serve the people of the nation. It is there to be the government's arm, the government's, I guess, body by which to defend the people of the nation. It represents you, it represents me, it buys on behalf of you, it buys on behalf of me, or at least the taxpayer, but more widely citizens. So people talk about ministries and governments as a whole, but the fact of the matter is that they exist to represent you. The MOD are really, really clear about that they want to be as transparent as possible because you are the person they are effectively buying this for. They are defending you. And there is a misconception at Fundament that everything the MOD does is either purposely opaque, purposely non-transparent in order to sneak stuff past budgetary constraints, or it's restricted, confidential, secret, or top secret in regard to actually the technologies that they are developing and the stuff they're buying, when actually I think that's a pretty poor misconception. They are really quite a transparent ministry. So I'll leave links to some of their pages in the description, but the information I'm going to talk about today is literally just from a singular page, which is their sort of summary information from 2020 to 2021. So this today will be dealing more with the larger purchases and what they've actually done, what they're documenting, and what they're being clear about. So here we go. First off, it gives us a few key points and trends for the year 2020 to 2021. That is 27.2 billion paid by the MOD core department to UK and foreign-owned organisations, which is an increase of 0.6 billion from the previous period of 2019 to 2020. There was 11.8 billion pounds valuation of new contracts placed during the 2020 to 2021 period. There was a 43% total MOD procurement expenditure with the top 10 suppliers, which is a 1% decrease from the prior year, although that is, as a percentage as opposed to actual number value. There was £3.8 billion expenditure with BAE Systems plc, the most to any holding company in that period. There was a £2.3 billion expenditure against existing private finance initiatives in 2021, and a £7.9 billion estimate of identified UK export orders of defence equipment and services in 2020, which is a decrease from the prior year. And below that, they list a responsible statistician, which is sort of involved within the analysis expenditure section of the MOD and the head of the branch. And they leave a telephone number, they leave further information and a mailing list for any further information or questions you might have. They have a background quality report. They have a page that can basically allow you to email in perhaps updates or suggestions to the statistics they give. So it really is quite open, and I think that's rather important. They have a full-on context page defining what the MOD is, what the MOD core department is. They have sections on national statistics publications and what's actually needed to be done in order to carry those out effectively. They have the supply chain, or at least the procurement process lines for major equipment projects, including any sort of approval or gates that might be needed. They really do have all sorts. They have the forecast for 2020 and 2021, comparisons of original and current forecast costs for major equipment projects, the highest capitalization ones. And from the top, that's Lightning II, Dreadnought, the Astute boats basically, Queen Elizabeth class carriers, the Ajax, Type 26 frigates, MIVs, P-8A Poseidon, the E-7 Wedgetail, the Type 31 frigate, Marshall, core production, and I assume that refers to the Marshall program, core production ability, complex weapons pipeline, Apache sustainment program, Warrior sustainment program, Protector, a new style of IT, and Skysaber. So it really does show you exactly what there is. In the period of 2021 as well, 42% of all expenditure was from competitive contracts, that being it's awarded to a company following a bidding process or competition where the company is awarded a contract on the basis of its proposal, effectively. It also has infographics about which firms were paid or which holding companies were paid over 50 million by the MOD and the most major suppliers of defence services for the MOD. And that's obviously for firms that were paid over 500 million, that's BAE Systems, Babcock, Airbus, Ferrovial, Rolls-Royce, Lockheed Martin, Kinetic, Leonardo, Boeing, General Dynamics. Between 250 and 500 million, Thales, Leidos, DXC, Serco, Jacobs Engineering, BT. Between 100 and 250 million, that's KBR, Capita, Kia Group, Raytheon, AI Convoy, Terra Firma, Infrared, Compass. And then they have the 50 to 100 million range, which is stuff like IBM, Safran, Carlyle Europe. They really do lay out this expenditure pretty transparently because I believe they have an obligation to, and they really do stick to that obligation. They have all sorts of statistics on, and this is just really a taste on one of their secondary pages, their trade industry and contracts for the year of 2021. And so I think it's rather uninformed when people say that there is no information out there, that there is no transparency, when the fact of the matter is, without even having to do any digging whatsoever, one can go onto the MOD's national statistics and simply look up where the highest expenditure is, what percentage are competitive contracts, and original predictions, forecasting, all of that stuff. So I really do recommend you take a look at this, because there is a misconception that defence spending is done in back rooms, smoky back rooms, which is untrue in my view. And the statistics here really do say a lot, and they're interesting anyway. So I do recommend that you actually go take a look at that. What we see from all of these statistics, all of this data that we can find, and this is just scratching the surface without even having to put in any real effort, is that the MOD is actually really quite responsible, as all government organisations really should be, and held to account. Beyond this, contracts of a lot of kinds make the news. And the reason people perhaps aren't always aware of it is because public expenditure is a major thing. There are larger expenditures than are made in defence elsewhere. And so it doesn't always make the newspapers, but if one looks at any, I guess, defence journal or security journal, then one sees that actually they are reported. There are a lot of particularly high capitalisation contracts reported, but there are plenty of places where one can see incoming contracts, who wins competitions, how bidding processes are going, smoothness of it. And so the idea that there's no information is not true. The idea that there's no transparency is also, I'd say, not true. There is, of course, a place for secrecy. When you're dealing with this sort of industry, we can say that there are times when one does potentially have to not report on certain things because they are in the interest of national security. But what I think we can also say is that the near totality of defence spending is clear with its aims, with the recipients of payments, and with the processes involved. And it's really quite important to understand that the MOD is stuck a little bit, I find, between a rock and a hard place. That is, having too many processes, checks, systems, reviews, etc., and they're labelled bureaucratic, inefficient, and the entire, I guess, military complex of the United Kingdom is labelled in a similar manner alongside them. Or if they are, I guess, not so thorough, they're labelled as reckless, out of control. And they're often called the two simultaneously, both bureaucratic and reckless with money, which I don't think those are two tenable positions at once. So I think there really does need to be a bit more research done into this sort of stuff, into the specific procurement processes, which I'm going to cover a little later, into the way contract systems actually work, into the way competitions, bidding processes work. But it's important that one actually digs below, I guess, the sensationalism that the media perhaps promotes on this sort of stuff, given that it is a government administration or organisation, that the MOD and defence firms inherently don't operate necessarily in the same theatre that a lot of other businesses operate within. So perhaps worth digging into, because defence really isn't just big guns and tanks. It's proper and responsible accounting, it's government transparency, it's corporate systems running smoothly. And in order for it to be more profound than this just, fast jets and lasers, and don't get me wrong, I really do like fast jets and lasers, they're pretty fascinating technology, but to transcend it and to go beyond exciting technology, people actually have to look at the resources that the MOD and defence firms have to offer. As what they present goes really above and beyond the corporate, social, environmental, financial, and obviously military responsibility of most other firms in any other industry. And I'd say the MOD does an excellent job of providing ample information, as is in line with their transparency policies and the transparency policy of the government. So I think that's rather important, not to just look at military technology and ignore the business side, or the governments involved, or the administrations, organisations involved, but actually to take a look at the data, to take a look at what they're providing, to take a look at the real level of transparency that these organisations can supply. So I think I'll leave it there, but I really would recommend going and checking out these sites, because they're rather important, actually, and the MOD provides excellent resources, and you'll see excellent resources on any defence firm site. So